Hello and welcome to episode 207 of the Book Binge, where I'm doing something just a little bit different for this video. I finally read the Percy Jackson and Kane Chronicles crossover stories for the first time, those being the Son of Sobek, and then what is included in the Mark of Athena paperback here. I believe this one is called the Staff of Serapis. That's the never before seen short story there. And then the never before seen short story in this House of Hades paperback is the Crown of Ptolemy. So these three stories are short stories crossing over the Percy Jackson and Kane Chronicle universes, and set specifically after both the Kane Chronicles and Heroes of Olympus. These two series after this is when this little trilogy of stories takes place. All of these stories are right about 70-ish pages, so depending on how you consider, stories to be called, they're all short story, not quite novella length, but they're sort of kind of getting in there, 70 pages, give or take about 10 or so. The three of them combined basically make for a long novella, short novel kind of thing, going on right around 40,000 words, if I'm not mistaken. Depending on how you classify these things, that is about the length of the three of these combined. Like I said, these should not be read until after Heroes of Olympus and Kane Chronicles both, and that is when I read them, when I finally actually got to them. So let's talk about these short stories individually and in turn in their own respect. The first of these stories, The Son of Sobek, is crossing over Percy Jackson and Carter Kane. For it, I think the story is pretty decent. It's not terrible, but it's also not fantastic. It's just kind of middle of the road. I think it's Riordan basically just testing the waters of this whole crossover thing that he'd been sort of having the idea of and planning, and the thing that's sort of hinted at the end of The Serpent's Shadow, the third Kane Chronicles book. There's something hinted about this in there. At the very least, the story is memorable, even if it's not like the best thing in the world. The setting of it, these sort of encounters of it between Carter and Percy, and also the creature they encounter in it, is memorable. Even if the conceit of it being what causes Carter and Percy to meet is kind of meh. It's not my favorite thing in the world. It's not, it doesn't seem super relevant or interesting. It's just kind of whatever. But even if that is the case, the interactions of these characters and their worlds essentially is fun and interesting setup for this trilogy of sorts as a whole. I believe that the Son of Sobek is a little bit too prone to the silliness of Percy as a narrator. That might have been just because I was reading it at a time when I was reading a lot of other self-serious, not quite as YA or middle grade stories. So maybe that was a me thing when I was reading it. But it was good. It's not the most satisfying story, but it is definitely serviceable. It kind of just is what it is. Although I think one of the major weaknesses of the Son of Sobek as a whole, however, is that I think it could have used better clarification on where it happens in the timeline, that being after Heroes of Olympus. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, when he was writing The Son of Sobek, at least this first story in the trilogy, I don't think the Blood of Olympus had been conceptualized yet, the last book in the Heroes of Olympus. So maybe some of those references couldn't quite have been made yet. That's kind of one of those things that I think should have been planned out a little bit, or I don't know. It just didn't really hit right, because when I finished The Son of Sobek, I was like, so is this after Percy Jackson or is this after Heroes of Olympus? Because I really have no idea is how I was feeling. But the second story in this trilogy, the Annabeth Chase and Sadie Kane crossover, the Staff of Serapis, the second story, is a huge improvement. Huge improvement. This story alone makes this sort of trilogy worth reading for me. Annabeth is a better character than Percy, in my personal opinion. She's also a better narrator than Percy in this respect, even if her habit of talking to non-speaking beasts and it working is kind of a meh idea that Riordan has a habit of doing with characters, but especially with Annabeth. Don't love that aspect, but Annabeth as a whole is less silly as a narrator, and I tend to like that a little bit better. The circumstances for Annabeth and Sadie meeting in this story are also a little bit better than the previous story. There's much higher stakes over the course of the story, arguably the highest stakes in the entire trilogy as a whole. Like, half of this entire short story is just a Rick Riordan climax sequence. So if you like the ends of the finales of books, like the entire back half of the story, maybe even more than that, feels like that. It feels just as tense. It's really awesome. It's just really great. It's great in that way that Riordan knows how to be in climactic sequences. Also, a nitpick on the other hand, however, because of the way that the Son of Sobek ended, despite the way that Annabeth and Sadie meeting being pretty believable, Annabeth knowing Carter's name doesn't really get explained to any degree because of the way that the first story ends. Percy can't actually say Carter's name at the end of that first story. If it's something to do with the magic of it, right? So the fact that that Annabeth knows Carter's name despite Percy not having been able to tell her is weirdly not explained. Like, it's, I guess, kind of implied that maybe he could like write it or suggest it, like charades it or something like that. But like the fact that it's not explained was like a really weird kind of turnoff in my mind. I'm like, but yeah, why would she know Carter's name if Percy can't even say it? Like, at least explain that, Riordan, please, kind of thing. Like I said, it was a nitpick, but whatever. Another thing that made the Staff of Serapis a little bit better than Son of Sobek in my mind, however, is the fact that it makes it a little bit more clear that this little set of stories takes place after Heroes of Olympus. References still could have been made a little bit clearer or more satisfying, but yeah, it takes place after Heroes of Olympus. It's made for sure at this story, but I think that's something that should have been established in Son of Sobek first thing. Also, the Rick Riordan lover, just in general, in me, loved this story. Like, I wonder to a degree why I only rated this 4 stars for a bit until I remembered a couple of my smaller criticisms about it. The story's just fun enough to be, if you like Riordan, you're really going to like the Staff of Serapis. It's just that simple. But the final story that appears in this little paperback, The Crown of Ptolemy, the conclusion of this little trilogy of crossover stories, is really satisfying. It's really great. I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I don't remember a lot about it specifically, just that it pays off exactly what Staff of Serapis specifically sets up in classic Riordan fashion. A portion of the villain arc in this one is maybe a little bit over the top, even for Rick Riordan, but in general, it feels like that same kind of vibe, that it's just fun and I guess sort of weirdly wholesome in its own weird way. Again, I think Percy's narration for this one, because it returns to Percy for the Crown of Ptolemy, is a little bit cheesy in moments, as always, but it's not as bad in this one as the Son of Sobek, and it's also significantly better still than the Son of Sobek, but just barely under Staff of Serapis for me. I think that Son of Sobek is easily the least favorite, not least because it doesn't really feel connected to the other 2 stories in a lot of ways that it feels like it should be, which is just kind of weird. But that's just kind of how things go sometimes. I think that this little trilogy of stories is pretty good. If you enjoy Riordan's creative use of mythology, this is fun just as everything. In fact, this is a point specifically for the Crown of Ptolemy, because he's setting some of these things up in Staff of Serapis quite a bit. I don't remember if any of these things are really set up in the Son of Sobek. I guess a little bit, but not really that relevantly at first, especially in Staff of Serapis and Crown of Ptolemy. However, the way that Riordan plays with the mythology to combine the Greek and Egyptian mythos is really creative, because he uses mythos that combined the Greek and Egyptian mythology from, centuries, thousands, millennia ago. So that really works out. It's really creative use of some of that stuff, and that's something that Riordan is always pretty good at, and for that reason, the trilogy is pretty fun and enjoyable. I don't think it's necessarily anything incredibly exceptional, but it's definitely good. That's just kind of where Riordan tends to fall for me. It reminded me that I also need to go back as well and reread a lot of the other Percy Jackson side stuff before I move on to rereading Magnus Chase. So that's some of the stuff that I'm going to be reading early in the next year. If you want to know a little bit more about some of my 2025 reading plans, I actually did a video of that 2 days ago, which you can check out, which I recommend checking out. Some of this other Percy Jackson side stuff is going to be on that list. Or as an alternative, if you don't want to have to go searching for that video, just wait until the end of the video for the end card, basically right about now or in a few seconds from now, and that will have the video for it. But thank you for watching this review. I enjoyed this little trilogy of short stories. Pretty low stakes, or at least, not necessarily anything that I have to go too crazy about trying to read or trying to get into, because they're short stories, and I enjoyed my time with them, and I think you will too if you like Riordan. Thank you for watching this review. I'll be back, I guess tomorrow will be my year in review video, and that will be fun to do. I'll figure out a way to get that up day of, so we'll have a little bit of fun with that, but I'm very excited about that. 2024 was a huge year. I appreciate all of you guys for helping make that to be the case. I'll be back in the next video either way, and I just hope to see you there.